Senate Majority Leader Joel Villanueva wants to look into how the Philippine government can revive the country's salt production industry. Villanueva said it's quite shameful for an archipelagic country to be exporting at least 80% of its salt requirements, as stated by the Agriculture Department. The Philippine Chamber of Agriculture and Food also recently said that the country currently imports 93% of its salt from Australia and China. For more on this, we are joined by the group's president, Danilo Fausto. Mr. Fausto, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Nikki.
All right, sir, let's begin with your group's revelation last week that the Philippines imports 93% of our salt needs from China and Australia. How long have you known that this was the situation?
Well, this all started because of the passage of the ASIN law in 1995. It started to kill the industry because the law requires that the salt manufacture should be iodized. And the support from the Department of Trade was not given. So the salt farmers failed to process their salt in iodized form. Iodine is important also, especially to the marginalized sector of our society. And but unfortunately, on the other hand, it affects also our export products that requires natural salt because foreign countries don't like to accept and refuse to accept our products, export products that are with iodine because it is more or less altered. And so therefore also we use salt for fertilizer for our coconut trees. We need at least 300,000 metric tons of salt, natural salt. We don't need iodine for our coconut trees, and also our large cattle, our cows and carabaos are using salt and salt mineral blocks part of their feeds.
So you're saying, sir, that particular law required all salt products to have iodine, even if there's a market for natural salt. Is that the flaw in the law that you're saying?
Yes, and that's there. Yes, Mike, that's very clear. And so if you sell natural salt or rock salt in the market, that's illegal. You need a permit from the FDA. So that killed our salt industry, which is a very, very vital ingredient in our supply chain. It's not only, there's so many 14,000 uses of salt for food, for manufacturing, for chemicals, pharmaceuticals. We use salt. Just like any other raw materials in the processing of our products. Also in our food, you do not have fish paste or bagoong or fish patis, and also we're dyeing and we use as the salt.
Sir, I understand that the ASIN law was passed in 1995, but was this situation not contemplated? Were the needs for natural salt not actually thought of by lawmakers when they passed that particular law?
Well, I would suppose that because if you recall, then Secretary Flavier has a jingle that really espouses for the use of iodized salt for those that are lacking iodine. There's nothing wrong with that, but unfortunately, there are also some other uses of salt, and the law make it illegal to manufacture salt without iodine. That's not iodized. So that's the fault of the law, and we are asking Congress and Senate if they can do something about it. We are not asking for a repeal of the salt as be iodized, but also give incentives for those our manufacturers and producers to produce natural salt, which has its uses also.
Now, in that particular law, I assume that particular law was really crafted to help those who are malnourished or may have lacking nutrients in their food supply. But that particular law also provides for support, supposedly by the Department of Trade and Industry, to local producers of salt. They're supposed to help them secure loans and other financial needs. Has that happened?
That's our problem, Mike. It did not happen. Just like any other products that we have, we have beautiful laws, but the implementation of this law, especially for agricultural sector, has been neglected because the budget are not there, the attention is not there. Now, we will have a little crisis if we do not have salt. I cannot imagine ourselves, we eat something for our table. You use salt as an ingredient.
Senator Joel Villanueva has passed a resolution looking into whether we can revive our salt industry. But what's the prospect, Mr. Fausto? Because if we're saying that the industry is dead, how can we revive it and supply the needs for natural salt, especially if there's a particular law requiring the production of iodized salt only?
That is why there's a need to amend the law. And we have the second longest shoreline in the world. We have 36,000 kilometers of shoreline. It's really embarrassing that we are importing salt from Australia, China, and some also in Thailand and New Zealand. Last year, we imported 646,000 metric tons of salt. And that does not include already the need for our coconut trees, which is the cheapest source of fertilizer is salt. And also the cheapest source of our feeds for our animals is salt.
But what can be done after changing the law, Mr. Fausto? Should the government provide incentives for local salt producers to actually invest in machines, equipment, and all other needs to be able to prop up the salt industry? And how long will it take?
Well, if you remember Pangasinan, the name Pangasinan comes from pang-asinan, and it's in the salt in Bolinao, in Alaminos, also in Ilocos provinces. These salt are being produced, and it can easily be with a 70-kilometer long shoreline. We can already be sufficient with salt. But we need a economies of scale. We need the volume because salt is cheap, and to make money for farmers, we need big investors to really process the salt. And so therefore, investments or incentives for investment should be given for those that will produce, especially natural salt, so that people can come in and start producing again salt for our needs.
But for the time being, Mr. Fausto, while the law has not yet been repealed, is there anything that the government can do, particularly the executive, to ensure that we don't meet a salt crisis?
Well, the problem of the salt farmers is that they cannot get permits or licenses, because it will be illegal to produce salt that is not iodized. So I would suppose if you say rock salt or natural salt in the market, in the palenques, that will be illegal. And that's why sometimes I was able to buy some, but I know it's illegal to buy this. But this is the cheapest source for our, especially me. We are in dairy. We need a lot of salt for our carabaos and our cows. Salt mineral blocks and so on, that we proved as part of the feeds as an ingredient.
So is there anything the executive can do at this point to support the salt industry? Like, for instance, trying to provide the equipment to be able to produce iodized salt at the very least?
Yes, that will be a great move. That's why, as a matter of fact, when I look at the budget that was presented by DBM to the Congress, to the President, there's no single centavo allocated for the revival of the salt industry. And we already have flagged Yusek Ding Panganiban regarding this, and he is trying to do something about it. But having machines to produce iodized salt will be great. But iodized salt is more expensive. 2 days ago, I went to the supermarket. It's 42 pesos a kilo. A natural salt will sell only about 10 pesos 50 centavos a kilo. Which is used for fertilizers for the coconut trees and for our livestock. So that's the difference. So we need a volume for economies of scale for those who will enter the production of salt.
Mr. Fausto, how serious is the government in implementing the ASIN law, prosecuting those who produce natural salt without iodine? I was looking, while talking to you, I was looking at the particular law. there were no prohibited acts, but there are sanctions for those who violate the law. But I couldn't seem to find an express requirement that only iodized salt should be produced. But trusting from your experience, are you seeing that this is really being prosecuted, the production of natural salt?
Not really, because we can still buy rock salt in the palenques. But using this as a violation of the law, it prohibits local government units. Perhaps it deterred them from issuing permits and licenses for those who will produce salt, because you can see it can be used against them as violating the ASIN law. So that's the prohibition. That's why we need to immediately revise the law. And I'd like to thank Senator Joel Villanueva for taking a look at this. It has been, there was been proposal since before by former Congressman D.B. Sabellano, Ilocos Sur, and Ramon Guico, Pangasinan, to revive the salt industry, but it did not fly. So I hope that this coming, this Congress now, I think it's the 18th Congress, they should take a look and immediately revise this law so that we can revive it and be an exporter. Be an exporter of salt. Can you imagine? We have one of the longest shoreline, and we're importing salt. It's really embarrassing.
Lastly, Mr. Fausto, let me zoom out a bit. Seeing that the issues that we're facing right now with sugar, with salt, should President Bongbong Marcos consider appointing a full-time agriculture secretary? Because we have two groups saying, one group saying that this will ensure that someone is focusing on agriculture issues. But some lawmakers are also pointing out, with the president at the helm of the agriculture department, the DA will get a 44% increase in budget next year.
That's right. We are very happy, Mike, that the president is the secretary, because now we are assured we will no longer go house to house or door to door to the congressmen and the senators asking and begging for increase in budget for the Department of Agriculture. And with the president, with the different problems now besetting us, not to our making, because these are climate change, the war in Russia. These things should be addressed by no other than the leader of the land, because it involves not only the Department of Agriculture. When you would like to revive the agriculture sector, it involves the OST, DTI, DENR, talk about bamboo, there's so many other agencies that are involved, and one single secretary without the president, it will be difficult to move around at this point. But when everything settles down within this year, I would suppose that because of the numerous activities and responsibilities the president has, eventually, I guess he has to do that. But at the moment, we are happy that he's there.
How soon, Mr. Fausto, though? Because in the sugar mess that we're seeing, supposedly one of the reasons why an undersecretary signed that sugar order was because there was no response yet from the president whether to issue that sugar order. How soon should a president appoint a full-time agriculture secretary to ensure that all the requirements of a particular agency are actually met? In this case,
we are facing a food shortage and food emergency for this year because of these things that I mentioned. We have problems of the fertilizer increases in cost, the inputs, and without the president there at the helm, it will be difficult to really move this. We have an incoming, we'll be projecting and anticipating that come November, we'll have problem on our fish requirement, because we will be declaring a fish holiday by November up to February. If we are not ready for it for this coming November, we will have no fish this coming last quarter of the year. So this thing has to be anticipated and be done immediately. And perhaps now that the sugar is being harvested, we will be able to see, perhaps anticipate a leveling off and the supply requirement. If there's really a need to import, then we will know after we've seen the performance of the harvest. That's the only time we decide if we import. Because as a general rule for us, during the time of harvest season, no importation should be allowed. In order to not to kill our agricultural industries.
All right. On that note, thank you so much for joining us this morning, Mr. Danny Fausto. He is the president of the Philippine Chamber of Agriculture and Food.
Thank you very much.